We are back. It's opening day, so we're here with some MLB DFS picks, lineup advice, strategy, FanDuel, DraftKings, Yahoo. It's opening day, April 7th, Thursday. Slate starts at 4 p.m. Feels kind of weird. There isn't a million games on today like there normally is for opening day, so it feels different. But we're here to help you out, and I'm super excited. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. Joined alongside our MLB manager, our USFL manager, our NFL writer, you name it. He's doing a lot for Occupy Fantasy. It's Chris Rooney. Chris, what's up, man? It's good to have you on the stream.
Ryan, appreciate that. Also, obviously, a big day for those of you who were with you in Miramata last night talking about PGA. The Masters obviously teed off this morning. Just a lot of things going on this week, but we are absolutely thrilled to be talking about some baseball today. So why don't we dive on into it? I know you mentioned 4 o'clock. That's the main slate on most providers today, but actually people who play on FanDuel, let's get started a little earlier than that, so they may have some questions for us.
Yeah, for sure. So if you have questions, throw them in the live chat. We'll be here till 2 p.m. Eastern. That slate over on FanDuel does lock at 2:20. So if you have questions about that, go ahead and throw it in the chat. And yeah, Chris, you're right. I did the golf stream last night. Did an NBA stream on Tuesday. Doing UFC stream tomorrow. Renaissance man here trying to check off DFS stream bingo. So
Who said the NFL offseason was calm, right?
yeah, right. Seriously, God. So all right. Very important announcement. We're going to be doing these videos pretty much every single day of the MLB season. 6 out of 7 days, we're going to take Saturdays off. But this Saturday, we will be here for you just because, we got to do it for the first week of the season. But make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Click subscribe below the video if you're not already. That way you'll get notified whenever we go live every single day during the MLB season. Obviously, all of our content for other sports will continue as well. The Daily Plug, which Chris and our new writer, Troy Clotter write, is up on the website now. The Occupy model ranks every batter, pitcher, stack, FanDuel, DraftKings, Yahoo. All that information at OccupyFantasy.com. Go check it out. And again, if you have questions throughout the stream, interrupt us, throw them in the chat, and we'll happily answer them. So I guess, Chris, let's just start from a high level, right? So 8 games on the FanDuel slate, 7 on DraftKings. Maybe a little refresher. What have we learned over the offseason? What are some key points for MLB DFS that people who just haven't played in a while need to remember if they're jumping back into contests today?
Me personally had a little bit of a month head start looking at spring training stuff. I know it was very limited offerings on DraftKings, but played some of those contests, was able to kind of start studying roster constructions, people employed. The big thing that we see in MLB DFS is people like to stack offenses, whether they're favorites or underdogs. You absolutely want to make sure that in any lineup that you build, you have at least one stack that uses the maximum amount of lineup slots for hitters, depending on where you play. So on DraftKings, that means you want to have at least one 5-man stack from an offense in any lineup that you build. On FanDuel, that would be at least one 4-man stack. FanDuel only has a maximum of 4. I believe Yahoo, you can actually play up to 6, so that's little bit of a different animal, but same idea over there, probably 5 or 6 on Yahoo. The other thing that we looked at, typically the best pitchers are the ones that people use. These are what people use in the winning lineups. They focus on isolating their pitcher-player pool to maybe 3 or 4 of the best starting pitcher arms that are playing in Major League Baseball on that day, and they just use those guys. Now, Brian, I know you actually spent a little bit more time diving into roster constructions and some of the higher dollar small field contests that some people play. So I don't know if that kind of meshes with what you learned this spring, but that's sort of what I recall about playing MLB.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the same thing that I reviewed as well. And again, we talk about on these shows, if you're new to a sport, or even if you've played a sport for a while, looking at what the top players do can really spark some ideas for you in your own lineups. And yeah, just to recap, if you look at some of the top 10 MLB DFS players, whether it's in the Roto Grinders rankings or however you determine that, yes, they're playing the best pitchers. They're not a play to play a 50% owned pitcher in their small field lineups. Really where the top players get different are in the stacks and playing lower owned stacks. You see top players win GPPs with 5% owned stacks, 10% owned stacks. And it's not to say you can't play chalky batters. You can, but there's a balance. If you play chalky batters, maybe you have to go a little bit riskier with their pitching. You can't just play all chalk, right? So it's definitely a balance. So let's jump into today's slate. And the early games, Chicago and Milwaukee on the FanDuel slate, I guess for those of you playing, there are some guys, some teams, some players that you might want to stack and play over there. Chris, who stands out from the Cubs and Brewers game early for those on the FanDuel slate?
Well, just looking at obviously classic style DFS contests, Corbin Burnes, the starting pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers, is far and away one of the better options on the entire slate. Not available on the DraftKings main slate, but over on FanDuel, where you only need to select one pitcher, Burnes definitely very much in the conversation to be your guy over there. Facing Cubs lineup that doesn't rank very highly in our stacks model. In fact, the Cubs are the worst offense in baseball, according to the projected lineups, maybe the official lineup now, that we have in the stacks dashboard on OccupyFantasy.com, which I see you're pulling up now for everyone. So that is another thing I like to look at when we're considering a starting pitcher play for the day. Not just how do we rank that starting pitcher, but also how do we rank their opponents. Usually when we get a picture like this, where we rank the pitcher very, very highly and the opposing offense extremely low, that means we probably should include that pitcher in our player pool today. So from that game, it's really just Burnes that I'm looking at. I'm not really interested in any of the Milwaukee hitters on that slate today.
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? So let's say you're playing on FanDuel, you have some lineups, and you're looking at least the top two options in the eyes of our model, Shane Bieber, Corbin Burnes. And I think this is a great example of when to place certain pitchers on certain sites. FanDuel wins are much more important. Strikeouts are obviously important as well, but going deep in the games, and FanDuel, because they don't subtract points for walks or hits allowed, you can have a little bit of a worse performance on FanDuel and get a better fantasy score than you can on DraftKings. So if you look at our model, which I have up on screen, Shane Bieber ranks number 1 for us, Corbin Burnes number 2. But if you look at the money line, Shane Bieber is just a minus 121 on the money line. Burnes is minus 195. So according to Vegas odds, who have a lot of investments in making sure they have the right lines, Burnes much higher chance of getting the win. So I think he's a much safer option. Whereas if you look at the K per innings pitch projection in our model, Shane Bieber 1.5 per innings pitch based on this matchup with this particular Royals lineup today, and Burnes a little bit lower at 1.34. I think over on DraftKings, I prefer Bieber, but I agree with you. I think there's a case to be made that Burnes is the number 1 option on FanDuel.
And the other thing there too, Brian, with Burnes, just stay wonky with FanDuel scoring. FanDuel also rewards you not just for the win, but for the quality start. That's not something DraftKings gives you points for, but basically any pitcher that goes 6 innings or longer and allows 3 earned runs or less, they'll get you an additional 4 points in your lineup. So Burnes, not only a strong candidate to get you the win today, but probably going to come very close to getting that 6+ innings and hopefully staying under 3 earned runs as well.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the stacks dashboard and let's look at some of the top overall stacks for today's slate. And the nice thing about the stack dashboard, and we talked about ownership earlier when it comes to contests and making sure you balance that, we do see cumulative ownership for each stack on the far right-hand side here. So Atlanta tops our stack dashboard, but they don't have the top ownership, which means they're a great high-risk stack in my eyes. So, Chris, why don't you walk me through some of the top stacks you outlined in the daily plug and where you think they best fit in terms of which contest to play them in?
I think Atlanta is probably the best all-around stack. There should be no shock there. We have it at the top of OF Index ranking, top projected isolated slugging, which is power upside. So have to like them in that spot here today on opening day against Tyler Mahle of the Cincinnati Reds. Would you like the Mets as well? I think that they're going off a little later this evening, so it's going to be an interesting situation tonight where obviously everything locks mid-afternoon here, but a lot of these games don't start until closer to the normal 7 p.m. or later time, Eastern Standard Time anyway, so we're going to probably adjust some things here for final confirmed lineups, but the Mets would be the next place I think I would go for a main stack that I really like just because they feature our favorite hitter of the day, Pete Alonso. It's the cover athlete of our article for you this afternoon. The Padres, obviously, we do rank them higher by Occupy Fantasy Index in our model. And that is the latest possible game on the slate today. So maybe the one downside to building Padres lineups today is we're probably going to be waiting the longest to find out who's actually playing for them. But thankfully, we do have a late swap ability here, so we can certainly make some changes if we get a surprise or two in the Padres lineup. Padres are facing a pitcher that ranks fairly low in our model in Madison Bumgarner today, so that's another reason to be pretty excited about playing Padres hitters. It's just going to be a matter of who's actually in the lineup there today. To answer your question of who to play where, I do think the Braves are probably good everywhere. And then looking at the Padres and the Mets. They're both going to be extremely popular. We have them projected for nearly, it looks good, but the Padres projected for almost 100% cumulative ownership on DraftKings, just under 90% on FanDuel, and the Mets are over 100% on both. So I guess if you were the type of person that's just building one lineup today, regardless of the size of your contest, I would probably primary stack the Braves, realizing that the other two that we highlighted today are also good plays, but they're also just going to be super popular, so there's not really any differentiation there for you.
Absolutely. So you see the Braves having a 41% cumulative ownership projection on DraftKings. San Diego and the Mets are basically right around 100. If we look beyond the Braves, and we're micro dosing a little bit here, Chris, on opening day, and trying to think outside the box of some stacks that people may not be thinking of. If we just look down the stack dashboard, we have Houston at 57%, St. Louis at 41% with the fourth highest team total. That's intriguing. And then we have other teams that fall below that, kind of that 50% threshold in the stack dashboard. And I guess this is just an overall question, and maybe you can answer about who fits this today. But if you're looking for an under the radar stack, right, in the stack dashboard, they don't necessarily rank highly, but what are some other factors that you're looking for that can maybe put you onto a stack that the field is not on?
Positive team total move is obviously a good. Well, I guess maybe it's not obvious, but to me, it's a good place to start. So if you are on FanDuel, you have an increase for the Brewers today. Looks like they're getting better than a run than they were originally getting in that game, so that's kind of interesting. And obviously, they're going to be fairly popular if you look at their cumulative ownership of just under 90% there. So that's an interesting off the radar option with now the highest team total on the entire board. So definitely would consider that as one thing to consider when selecting off the wall stacks. Something in general, and we don't have a good example today, but usually we will have, a couple times a week, an opportunity where we have a team that ranks really highly in like two or three of these categories, but super poorly in another. Typically, they'll go lower owned when that happens. So they may be a good high risk opportunity, especially in larger field contests. I'm laughing because I'm not laughing right now. I was laughing earlier when I saw this. I thought the Arizona Diamondbacks might be in that position today, but somehow they're actually potentially going to be more popular than our best team today. So I don't really have much interest in stacking the Diamondbacks. But in general, when we have a team that ranks fairly high by OF index and then has like a modest team total like that, if the ownership is significantly lower and they're on the underdog side of the game, I do like considering them as well.
For sure. In Arizona, and I was going to ask you about them because we've been joking about stacking the Diamondbacks for seemingly the last month. I think it's their price that makes them so attractive to the field because, you're not super excited about stacking the Diamondbacks, but they are pretty affordable on both sites. If we go back to the pitchers, there's one pitcher that stands out to me on DraftKings in particular, and it's the price of Zach Greinke, he's 7,800 on FanDuel. You're probably not going to play him there with the money line of plus 104, but on DraftKings at just $5,700. The field's not going to be on him. And to me, just running some early builds in our lineup builder, I was getting a ton of him. He makes a lot of things work. What are your thoughts on Greinke? Because in the past, our model hasn't liked him that much, but I got to imagine that with his price today that he looks pretty attractive.
Yeah, so first time I did it this season, get it out of the way on opening day. The Guardians lineup is not projected super highly in our stacks dashboard. So even as an underdog, Greinke is the type of pitcher that does keep the ball in the yard, doesn't typically give up a lot of earned runs. He doesn't necessarily have a ton of high strikeout upside, but I think we're used to seeing his price hovering somewhere between like the high sixes to the low $7,000 range on DraftKings. It's coming in at $5,700 today, and so it does, as you said, allow us to fit whatever we want in our lineups. Now, big picture, stepping away from that, if you're only building a handful of lineups today, the pricing for pitching on DraftKings isn't super prohibitive. We usually get a couple of guys that are like 9,000 or even 5 figures and above that end up being popular on DraftKings slates. That's not happening today on opening day. So don't feel like you need to use a guy like Zach Greinke, but he certainly allows you to pay up for some of the best hitters in the slate.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. And I think another reason he ranks relatively highly in the model is the weather boost that he's getting. So if we go to our weather tab, and this is always free, the Occupy model is behind the paywall. We're showing it to you here today on the stream. But the weather tab is always free, and it shows the precipitation chances the temperature, the air density index, and which direction the wind is blowing, and then gives you a plus or minus boost for batters both right-handed and left-handed. And no surprise, Chris, we see this phenomenon literally every single year because they're playing outside games in April in northern cities, and it's cold. And if you look at Cleveland and Kansas City, batters are getting a minus 11% boost, which inversely means pitchers are getting an 11% boost to their projections just because it is so cold there. 47 degrees, the wind's not a factor, and we're more able to play maybe mediocre or pitchers that don't project as well on paper when they get these weather boosts like this early in the season.
There's also, the other thing to consider here, and I certainly agree with you, is that the negative weather boosts are pretty much in play across the board today.
Yep.
So when you have a situation like that, it kind of means like everyone's on a level playing field. The two exceptions on here are that San Diego Arizona game, which is effectively in a dome with the roof closed at Chase Field in Arizona. And then obviously we have a positive boost for hitters playing in the one game that actually has 90-degree weather, which is in Los Angeles, the Astros and the Angels. Now, even with those negative boosts, we still like 3 different offenses better than Houston today, which is the highest ranked offense in that game, getting a positive weather boost for hitters. So to me, I'm not necessarily weighing the boosts too much in terms of, individual plays, but it does make sense for thinking about pitchers big picture that they may have a little bit of an easier time getting what they want to do done out there today.
For sure. And, I just brought up our live odds screen, which is brand new this week. You can compare odds in legal sportsbook states, or if you're not a legal sportsbook state, you can still compare odds across the books that we are partnered with. And if you look at all the totals for today's games, none of them exceed 9, not even 9.5, just 9. And generally on some slates, especially as we gear towards the summer, we'll get double-digit totals. But I guess a philosophy question here is for lineup building. If it's harder for players to hit home runs, which it will be today in the cold weather, and the totals indicate this, are you more likely to stack? Because when teams are scoring, that likely means that they're hitting singles, doubles, triples, knocking other batters in as opposed to hitting solo home runs, which is how we get some of these wacky lineups at the top, or some of these 5-1-1-1s or 4-1-1-1 type lineups. I think fully stacking more kind of makes sense on slates like today when the weather is cold and there might not be as many home runs that could pole vault a solo hitter with a home run or 2 home run game into the optimal lineup. What do you think?
No, I think that's actually a really good point to make, Brian. And I guess if you want to look for something actionable on a weather, slate like today, realistically, probably what we're going to be dealing with the first few weeks here in April, specifically the WOBA ranking in our stacks dashboard board. Obviously, hitters that are better at working counts, drawing walks, making contact, getting on base, not striking out. They're probably still going to have success today. They're going to have success in any kind of weather conditions, more so than the guys that rely on just power to succeed. So any of those teams that have really, really strong weighted on base average, WOBA ranking today are probably good places to start as well.
Yep, another check mark for the Cardinals there, who ranked 3rd in WOBA. Again, pretty low ownership across the board, so I think they fit the bill here as well. Great low-owned option for different contest types. All right, it's 1:50, 10 minutes left in the show. If you have any other questions, make sure you get them in the chat. So we have iRockNoobs, great username, says good luck this season. We appreciate that. Good luck to you. Adam's in the chat says let's get it. Occupy Fantasy, let's get it for sure. Again, make sure you're subscribed to the show, to the channel, get notified when we go live. Doing these videos every single day pretty much during the MLB season. Every other sport is coming as well, so make sure you subscribe. Don't miss a show. Give us a thumbs up if you like the content. Make sure you're in our Discord server, by the way. Click the join button below this video. Chat with other members of the OccupyFantasy.com community. Let's see, Chris, anything else we haven't discussed about this slate that sticks out to you?
Well, the biggest thing that I kind of wanted to talk about today, and I know we dove into it briefly, Brian, is you did a lot of work looking at small field contest lineup construction. We did put a couple of new notes in the plug, but we'll be adding some new content throughout the week to sort of beef that up and really give people some more actionable insights as we see them. Your biggest takeaways from doing all that research, and maybe in an actionable sense, like, did you find anything that you were doing in your own personal process last season that you have decided to change this season?
The biggest thing for me is that I was trusting the model a lot, as you should, and I wasn't factoring ownership as much as I should have, where sometimes I would blindly play stacks, and they may be super popular, especially in small field, high dollar, sharper contests. and then play them with chalkier pitchers. And now I'm really drawing thin against those other lineups who did the same thing. So to me, I'm looking more towards if I do stack a chalkier team, it's going to be with lower owned pitchers, or I'm just going to secondary stack them, only have a 2-man stack or a 3-man stack. The other thing I think is, and we've talked about this before, but it was nice to get concrete data on what pros do. If you're playing, let's say you're playing 3 lineups, and we get this question a lot. We got it last year, we got it in previous years. If I'm playing 3 lineups, do I do 3 different pitchers on FanDuel? Do I do 3 different stacks? What's the best way to do this? And unequivocally, the answer, the research is very, very clear. It's clearer than any of this other data that we found on small field contests. If you're playing multiple lineups, a handful of lineups, you basically want a different main stack in every single lineup. And intuitively, that may seem like you're spreading yourself a little thin, Chris, but really what it does is in a small field contest, 100 people, 200 people, 500 people, you really give yourself 4 different chances at finding the optimal 5-man stack. Because if you find that, you're going to be in the top 1 to 5%. Then if your pitchers do what they're supposed to do, now you're competing for a small field GPP win. So by giving yourself as many chances as possible in your different lineups, that's how you become a successful small field player in MLB.
I think it's a really good point that you emphasize the 5-man stacks too, because we find people who use optimizers or lineup builders that'll just give you straight optimal fantasy point projection lineups that'll be like those 1-1-1-1-1 or maybe like a mini stack here or there. For some reason, those actually end up being the more duplicated lineups on slates because those are the ones that everybody sees when they use popular tools, right? So by building these highly correlated lineups, using the maximum amount of hitters that you can in a stack, basically what I'm trying to say is you actually do not, in my experience anyway, need to worry too much about being highly duplicated when you do that, even if you're stacking like a huge favorite, because typically you're going to get different, as you mentioned, with like a lower owned pitcher or two, or a secondary stack or a one-off hitter on top of that. That'll help you be a little different in the field. So, this is really the one DFS game personally where I do not worry so much about uniqueness because I feel like it's fairly easy to build unique lineups in MLB.
Yeah. Absolutely. See, Ken's in the chat. What's up, Ken? Glad you could wake up and have some breakfast on the West Coast to join the stream. He says, are we still using Fantasy Labs or are we migrating to Underdog like we did for NBA for lineup news? Chris, it seems like Underdog is the standard for those of you looking for starting lineups. Our model will update starting lineups as they come in and they'll get the check mark. Let's actually show this on screen really quickly. But while I'm bringing that up, Chris, maybe just for people who haven't played MLB in so long, what's the daily process look like? When are we looking for lineups? When can we start building? Things like that.
We're going to have a model update, basically about 8 o'clock Eastern every single morning, and we will pull into the anticipated lineups, based off of the starting pitcher. So most teams have a template lineup against either a left-handed or a right-handed starting pitcher. That we have access to. That'll be in the model. You can start building as early as first thing in the morning if you really want to. Most teams will post their lineups for the day's game by about a couple of hours before their game's start time. So typically main slates go off 7 o'clock Eastern. We're sweating those West Coast game lineups for those lock times. But you can certainly expect every single team to tell you who's playing fairly early every single day. This is nothing like the NBA where you get late scratches quite frequently. We get a pretty good idea of who's playing in baseball games every single day before lock.
For sure. So to answer Ken's question, are we migrating to Underdog if we're using Twitter alerts for lineups?
Yes. My answer would be yes. It's the best resource out there. That's what we use. So sure. We're obviously going to tell you to use what we use.
Exactly. And we're never against telling people about other free resources. So certainly go use that. Follow them on Twitter. All right, Chris, we got 5 minutes left. And if we have any more questions about today's slate, throw them in the chat. We'll happily answer them. Chris, I know you've been doing some season-long leagues. You were deep in the spring training. You've been looking at some futures. Who do you like to take home the World Series this year? And any other futures that you're looking at that you think we can get on today before these games start?
We had a couple of people discussing some interesting ideas here for this in the Discord yesterday. Me personally, I think I really like World Series is tough, but for both leagues, I like the Dodgers in the National League, so maybe that's not so fun because that's basically the favorite. But I still think they have the best roster top to bottom, so I expect them to come out of the National League once again here. And I like the Toronto Blue Jays in the American League East, and in the American League, which is obviously tough for me to say as a Boston fan, but I just think they have the best lineup in the game right now. And they barely missed the postseason last year. MLB expanded the field one extra spot for postseason play in that collective bargaining agreement they just agreed to. So a team like the Blue Jays, I think, is super interesting. Division winner futures, league winner future, maybe even World Series winner futures. Their top slugger, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. You can use our prop finder tool here on the website that we have now. If that's something you wanted me to kind of help you transition to and find some good future lines for him. American League MVP potentially. Will he take it from Shohei? Doubtful, but that's one of the better candidates to expect to do it. Will he lead the majors in homers? He's another player who may be an interesting bet there. So those are some things that I would be looking at and thinking about for prop bets here before the season kicks off personally. But we're obviously going to be looking at things throughout the season and give you some interesting ideas as well as we learn more information about these teams every day.
Absolutely. So I do have the prop finder up here on the screen. The link is in the description below. You can also access it through the betting link in the main menu of OccupyFantasy.com. And just looking at the Blue Jays here to make the postseason, if you do a little line shopping, minus 355 at FanDuel. That's all the way up to minus 425 at DraftKings. And to win the World Series, you can get actually 9-1 over at MGM compared to just 8-1 at PointsBet. So make sure you're line shopping. All the books that are shown here on screen on the props finder, we're partnered with, and we have great deposit bonus and free bet offers for new users. So make sure you use the links. Have access to every sportsbook in your state so you can get the best lines every single time that you bet. We got a question here in the chat. Any tips for low-risk contests, which we haven't covered yet, Chris? So 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads. What's the main strategy that we're looking at to build those types of lineups?
You want to play hitters that hit near the top of the order. We actually have a low-risk filter in our model, so it'll give you all the best hitters that are hitting first through fifth in the respective batting orders for their teams, and play the best pitchers. I know that sounds overly simplistic, but basically the guys that we have ranked at the top of our model for pitchers today, they're the best ones to use in low-risk contests. So those are the places that I would focus on. And top stacks still matter in low-risk contests. You want to focus on base more than power upside. So again, that's another vote for weighted on base average because you want a nice floor of points from your hitters.
Yeah, are you worried about fully stacking those contests, or are you really just trying to get the best plays possible on the hitting side?
Great thing for us to clarify. You can certainly do a little bit more in terms of like mini stacking. So if you only like a couple of hitters from a team here or there, maybe you want to combine a few of the best top of the order hitters or just highest ranked hitters in our model from respective teams. That's very acceptable in low-risk contests.
For sure. Sounds good. All right, we got 2 minutes left in the show. Chris, any final thoughts before we get this season started?
Yeah, just maybe next time I'll get my ring light here to stop having an issue with me. That'll be good. Really do think that we got a long season ahead. A lot of different things to be considering and learning as we go. So just ease into it and learn a little bit more about these teams every single day. Don't overextend yourself. We'll be here for the next 200 days talking about baseball. So we'll certainly have spots where we think it makes sense to shove in a little more than usual. That is not the case today, but we are certainly excited to get things going.
Absolutely. So make sure you follow Chris on Twitter at Rooney FFB. Follow us at Occupy Fantasy. Make sure, again, for the third time, you are subscribed to the channel. That way, just so you're notified whenever we go live with these baseball videos, which we're doing 6 out of 7 days of the week during the regular season through July. Last stream and plug will be in August. So make sure you subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Any further questions, join our Discord server. Click the join button below this video. That'll get you access, chat with other members and staff of OccupyFantasy.com. So that'll do it for today. Happy Masters. Happy opening day. Happy UFC pay-per-view this weekend. Happy maybe USFL DFS in a couple weeks. So lots to be excited about. And we wish the best of luck to all of you. Thanks for watching, and we will talk to you soon.